Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator reveals more on retrocausal healing and group targeting. This is a very interesting show, Carl. It's kind of been building based on channelings from past shows and other channelings that have been done over time. But it pulls together a lot of threads and paints a picture that's pretty disturbing, but gives you a good insight into what's really going on.
Well, I would certainly agree with you. It's quite surprising to hear what is truly going on in the world and why. And I would just encourage people from the outset here, being warned, we're going to talk about football. That really isn't the point of this.
No.
There's a much bigger message. And we're going to use football and a football team as a focal point, as an example that there's deep and widespread, all-pervasive manipulation of humanity on all levels that's going on. And it has consequences for some quite tragic. And that is the point of it. And that's what we mean by targeting, that there's a deliberate interference.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of people who are football fans, and even a lot of people that aren't, know that something's a little bit off about the Detroit Lions, that they have a history of losing. And a lot of people actually do believe sincerely that they're cursed, literally, legitimately cursed. And we're here to tell you that that's not necessarily wrong, per se, because they are targeted by interloper interference. So it's a form of curse, essentially.
Yeah, and curses are real.
Yeah.
Yep, but they're not as powerful in most cases unless the darkness is fully behind it. Targeting is done by a large-scale group of civilizations who are really manipulating the world. And that's a huge amount of power to bring to bear. If they want to get after someone and cause them grief, they can do it. They have many, many ways to do so. And we'll be hearing about it.
So for those who have felt that there's something off about the Detroit Lions, we're here to say there is, and we're going to look into it. So here we go. We have learned from creator channelings shared in past shows that the Detroit Lions football team has been directly interfered with on numerous occasions. Most recently by having the referees in the football game between the Los Angeles Rams and Seattle Seahawks manipulated so the Seahawks would ultimately win, keeping the Lions out of the playoffs. Combining that manipulation with other timely manipulations in past seasons that worked to derail the Lions' championship ambitions, and they have not won a championship since 1957, I might add, it is clear that a pattern of ongoing targeting has been occurring for the Detroit Lions. Can Creator confirm that the Detroit Lions are, in fact, a quote-unquote targeted group, above and beyond any other team in the NFL? If this is true, is their targeting merely a waterfall effect of an even bigger targeting of the Ford family who owns the team and the city of Detroit itself? What can Creator tell us?
Well, that's a pretty serious charge. Well, that's not Creator, that's me.
Yeah.
But this is what Creator answers. These are Creator's words. Your question is an astute one that is bringing together many disparate threads that interweave into a pattern many would call a conspiracy theory. But we can confirm for you is the truth of things. This sorry history of seeming underperformance or frank failure to make any headway over a great span of time, to even be able to make a good showing and getting at least close to reaching the playoffs, for example, is a testament to subjugation rather than human failure or inadequacy. The perverse nature of what is going on will challenge belief for those hearing this message. But there are few messages of greater importance you may hear in a lifetime. The world is being run by interlopers, not by human beings. The sport of football, we are sad to tell you, but I have mentioned this previously, was an invention of extraterrestrials to create a form of punishment by making humans drawn like a magnet to a kind of blood sport that will take a gradual toll on the very health and longevity of the players. So they not only have a tremendous desire to play, but see it as an honor and a privilege to be among the many chosen to compete. Should it be any wonder that having gone to the trouble of creating a sports mania and a tremendous public spectacle and intense fascination, it is focused to cause human carnage as players bang into one another with such force they cause many times a lifelong injury or a life-shortening consequence from a toll on the central nervous system through frequent concussions. This has been now documented medically, but has had little impact at all on public interest and support for this morbid undertaking that is going against reason and logic, and even any kind of humane perspective. The fact people are willing to put their own health in jeopardy does not condone this to be on display for the many viewers enjoying the spectacle that costs them nothing but their time. We would say all involved in a karmic drama that will have a toll in terms of seeking and accounting from them for a level of responsibility, for it is the audience that makes this a lucrative business enterprise. The games you see broadcast during football season would not happen if money were not involved. But that is just a symbol of the nature of this enterprise, that it is a corrupt one. So, having gone to the trouble to create the mania, it is no wonder the interlopers also control it through manipulation, and many times will rig games to get a favored outcome they want to see happen for any number of reasons, not simply sports betting on a prearranged winner, but an outcome that will punish those involved in some way or another, as you will be discussing. This is a perversion of humanity in many respects. The fact you are culturally conditioned to look forward to this spectacle is a testament to the power of mind control manipulation in making all involved complicit in human degradation. And as you will be probing, the lions have a special place in the dark hearts of the extraterrestrials, truly running things behind the scenes, as they have deep hatreds and develop grudges quite readily. And when they have it in for someone, they will follow up and punish that party with relish.
Channeling is just so incredibly important, but I don't think anything is more important than this last sentence, which really paints the extraterrestrials in their true light, in that they are running things behind the scene, but that they also are petty and have deep hatreds and develop grudges quite readily. I mean, these are not entities that you want to partner with or have running your world. That's for darn sure, Carl.
Well, they've manipulated our culture to think that any ETs that might appear have to be vastly better than us and more advanced and will have transcended the need for war and all of that. And it's just not true.
Yeah.
The only ETs in the physical have been corrupted, all of them. There are ETs in higher vibrational states, but the physical ones who are here and doing things to the earth are all psychopaths. They're atheists. And we're going to hear about that again here today.
Yeah, absolutely. You asked, Creator, the last time the Lions won the championship was in 1957. Coincidentally, the city of Detroit at the time would experience its peak population of 1.8 million in 1958, and at the time was the most prosperous city in the country. And the entire region was arguably one of the most successful and prosperous on the planet. All that would change dramatically over the next decades for both Detroit and its Lake Erie sister city, Cleveland, Ohio. The NFL Cleveland Browns have not fared much better, winning their last NFL championship in 1964. And are they too a targeted group, quote unquote? One of the most deflating things ever to happen to a fan base was for the team to be moved to Baltimore and renamed the Ravens in 1996. In 2001, just 4 seasons later, the Ravens won the Super Bowl, a Super Bowl that arguably should have been won for Cleveland. The Browns were restored themselves in 1998, but have been one of the worst teams in the NFL since then, literally. Is all this the end result of intentional targeting or just coincidence? What can Creator tell us?
Creator says, this is far more than mere coincidence and is an example of targeting in its own right, having a great impact on all involved to change the destiny and the history of the game of football in the bargain, to create winners and losers as a way of mocking the participants, giving a taste of victory and then pulling the rug out and casting them down to become perennial losers once again is a bitter pill to swallow. And that was the purpose, not for something lofty or even something more mundane, but in a way deserved to happen as a comeuppance, for example. It was done through petty meanness because the extraterrestrial overseers who run the world from behind the scenes and many, many things within it are in fact petty, selfish, greedy, and malevolent. And that is because they are functional psychopaths. In a very real sense, those who run the world are the equivalent of the worst criminals you have locked up in your prisons, the hardcore psychopaths, many of them, devoid of conscience, ruthless, cunning, devious, and completely self-serving, and at the expense of others who may suffer tremendously. So this, again, was a regional issue that these two football teams both shared the dislike of the extraterrestrial overseers and were punished because of it.
That's not happy news, Carl. This idea that this was a regional issue and that these two teams are targeted simply because of their location and essentially for no other reason. But it doesn't matter because they're being targeted nevertheless. So this is disturbing news.
Well, it gets worse, as you'll see in the next question. It's
hang
not
in
just the
there.
football teams. It's not that they have a football fetish and they're trying to micromanage it. They're micromanaging everything.
Yes. Yeah. U.S. creator, arguably, no city on planet Earth did more to win World War II for the Allies than the city of Detroit, along with the entire Lake Erie region that today is best known by the derisive term the Rust Belt. As a result, no city on planet Earth did more to save humanity from a planned annihilation than the city of Detroit. Is the creation of the Rust Belt, resulting from the relocation or closure of countless industrial businesses, a direct consequence of interloper targeting as a backlash for the region's role in spoiling their World War II annihilation ambitions? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, as strange as this might seem, or even preposterous to many considering this perspective, perhaps for the first time especially, everything you are asking about here as a possibility is much more than that. It is a deep, fundamental truth. World War II was intended to result in the genocidal annihilation of humanity entirely, done stage by stage, bit by bit, first one region, then another, first one race, then another, first one political persuasion, then another, until eventually only a temporary supported victor remained. And by virtue of the mass attrition at their hands to reduce the human population dramatically, the final elimination of that victor nation and its populace was greatly facilitated. This is the cunning of these evil beings, that they would use humans themselves to do their dirty work. It is their modus operandi and has been all through the ages. It is not that they are squeamish. They adore witnessing bloodshed. It is what they do for entertainment. But they want it to be always someone else's suffering, so they will not put themselves in harm's way, but enlist others through manipulation to go to war and decimate a would-be enemy that is usually a contrivance to create animosity, suspicion, and fear, and a dispute of some kind to spark the conflict, as in overstepping a border and drawing the ire of a neighboring country, for example. In reality, the genocidal annihilation by the Nazi regime was simply a warm-up. That plan has never died. It continues to this very day. The extraterrestrials are simply taking a breather to relax while they engineer new plots to get things ramped up once again, to engineer worldwide conflict, and to weaken the Earth in a myriad of ways already undergoing. This is why you see all around you discord, disarray, dishevelment, and degradation of the quality of life, the effectiveness and efficiency of institutions, and growing suffering due to a rising crime problem, poor governance, extensive poverty, a declining food production and industrial capability, with skyrocketing costs, die-offs of thousands of life forms to degrade the environment, and relentless biowarfare of all kinds of microbial species and other forms of predators. All about you, the quality of life is in decline. And that is because you are literally circling the drain and set to be flushed away with a final mass campaign to eliminate humanity altogether. The fact that World War II was for them a failure is a very, very sore point. They have rooted out many culprits as they see it for punishment, not always logically or with great insight. But the record of industrial productivity of Detroit in particular, and the sister city you mentioned as an industrial base, was indeed in the vanguard of human productivity and national achievement of the US in helping to win World War II. In no small measure, a consequence of the many military vehicles and aircraft produced by those very factories, as well as other war materiel. Their contributions to a vibrant post-war economy set the US on a path to be a world leader and a dominant force for decades. A bitter reminder to the extraterrestrials of having backed the wrong horse, as it turns out, not realizing that the Nazis did not have divine support, but the Allies did. We do not participate in war, but we answer prayers to assist all who are in trouble in ways we can. And often that helps them to survive and even win the day. Because the interlopers are atheists, they give no credit where it is due, truly. This is why their mindset is to focus on that region of America and mark it for punishment and cruelty, and much more intense than average subjugation.
This might seem a little off, Carl, but I had it read somewhere that the real ending of World War II didn't occur until about 1957, when Eisenhower supposedly met with the extraterrestrials. That they say that was the real end. That the treaty that came about was really the end of World War II. The only reason I say that is because 1957 is this pivotal year where the Lions won the last championship, and in 1958, the city of Detroit began its precipitous decline from the most prosperous city in the world to one of the poorest, at least in the United States anyway. So again, we question anything that looks like a coincidence and wonder if there's something there.
Well, I'm not an expert on history, US history, even, and being an American, but this isn't the culture. I lived through this era post-war, immediately post-war. I was born in the late 40s, and so we were steeped in stories about the war and seeing the national landscape and seeing the rebound, except for this Rust Belt area. And, it's kind of puzzling if you think about it. I mean, automobiles are still a big deal. I mean, there's a huge economic juggernaut in the auto industry, and for that region to start to crumble, even with the center of automobile production, always was kind of strange to me.
Sure.
But
Absolutely.
it's out there. I mean, I remember just recently seeing this movie, Ford versus Ferrari, about the Ford Motor Company going into racing, and they were
Mhm.
trying to beat the Ferrari company in uh, auto racing at Le Mans, and there's a scene where Henry Ford II calls one of the car guys over to the window and says, "You see that little building down there? It's this giant factory, you know, at a distance." And he said, during World War II, 3 out of 5 airplanes rolled off that assembly line.
Yeah.
You think that FDR beat Hitler? Think again.
I'm not aware
So
of that
that's
quote.
reflecting this history, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Wow. That's interesting. Ah,
well, and we're being punished for it.
yes,
And
we
they
are.
are. And the
Yes.
US is in decline now
Yes.
compared to other regions of the world. And, you know, we could ask the question, you know, is this an extension? You know, we were leader of the Allies who
Right.
beat
Yeah.
the Axis powers. That's got to make us on the list of grudges to be dealt with.
Yeah. I would think you're right. That's a good question to maybe throw at Creator. U.S. Creator. Many people believe the creation of the Rust Belt lies squarely with the unions that formed in order to protect the interest of workers. Somehow, the selfish interests of industrials and its shareholders are often absent in these arguments. Nevertheless, the two sides have a history of being so divided that it rivals today's political divide in its intensity and fallout. With the antipathies on both sides ramped up via targeting and subconscious manipulation. Was this the mechanism of the backlash? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says this is very much the case. The standard operating procedure and overarching strategy of their infiltration and manipulation to subjugate and suppress humanity is to employ the strategy of divide and conquer. So, what you are alluding to is the division stage of that two-part strategy to weaken through increasing divisiveness by the parties having a wherewithal causes them to expand their energies on useless squabbles, conflicts, over competitiveness, and even acts of destructiveness that backfire as well, cause legal complications, and reduce overall efficiency, with much wasted effort going into hostile activities that end up backfiring and limiting the support of others. Whereas if the organizations and companies known for their excellence and productivity kept up that example in an even-handed way that rewarded all, it would be truly a triumphal example of human ingenuity, initiative, and the ability to make great things happen by being determined and dedicated to a worthy cause. But friction between the labor and management sides of things is like giving a poison pill. Things will grind to a halt. It will lead to much ill will and bad blood that can persist for a generation and even beyond, as it gets handed down in the lore about how the powers that be cannot be trusted. The workers are compromised and belittled and treated like underlings and even slaves, and so on. The interlopers are quite adept at using politics for manipulation. It is how they run their own worlds. What they do to one another is tragic. It is very much akin to a den of thieves who cannot trust one another and end up following the strongest leader, who inevitably will be the ruler, by being the most brutal and most powerful through ruthlessness and criminal cunning. They apply the same strategies and tactics in manipulating human beings through mind control, to think like they do, to be petty and mean, and prize being able to get away with things in believing their cause is just. So anything they do is fully justified. So there's no need for misgivings or guilt. This coarsens things and cheapens life. They promote all kinds of ideological campaigns to cause a rift and divide groups to mistrust and dislike one another. On and on it goes. One thing after another becomes a bone of contention, and people are forever struggling to even tolerate existence of one another, let alone do something in a competitive fashion that could catapult them forward with progress. You can see in the current political landscape how destructive it is to have political gridlock generation after generation, with the major parties hating one another and unable to compromise and agree on much of anything. That ability to reach common ground is subverted because people's minds are manipulated to disbelieve what they see with their own eyes and hear with their own ears and have a completely different interpretation of what takes place. So, being unable to agree on causes for problems that exist, let alone potential solutions, there can be little forward progress as political leadership keeps changing and is often hampered by the opposition party. So they get little done, even when technically they are in power. This is what hit the so called Rust Belt with a vengeance and is an apt description because it was raw vengeance on display to lay waste to that region of America and all in the area and depending on the economy.
You know, I didn't want to be right about any of this, Carl. I really didn't.
Well, I know people who don't believe that evil exists, that it's real. And this is an example of mind control manipulation.
Yeah.
I'm frankly, I mean, I hate to say it, but, people want to make nice. And the people who are sort of living in a little bubble are helping themselves survive, I guess. But they're missing the reality. And that is the point of it, to keep
Yeah.
them sequestered, keep you complacent,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just letting this go on. Because who can really do anything, as an individual in today's world? That's what the thinking is.
Right. Yes. And that's what we have to counter because there is an antidote to this. We're going to get to that at the end. Absolutely. U.S. creator. Since 1957, the Detroit Lions have won just one playoff game, a simply unmatched history of futility in the NFL, at least. However, that one year, 1991, was exciting, and the Lions got just one game away from the Super Bowl. But it wasn't without tragedy. In November of 1991, right offensive guard Mike Utley suffered a neck injury that left him paralyzed for life. 7 months later, the Lions' left offensive guard Eric Andelsek was struck and killed by a semi-truck that ran off the road while he was trimming his lawn. The driver lost control of the vehicle while wiping his face with a rag. And just like that, the Lions lost two of their best offensive linemen, two of the best perhaps in Lions franchise history. This was all but guaranteed that any chance the Lions had of winning the Super Bowl in January 1993 simply vanished. Two freak accidents so close together that paralyzed the team and removed two of their most important players suggests this was a vicious backlash to keep a targeted group from ever succeeding. What can Creator tell us?
Creator says this is what happened in a nutshell. One of the favorite strategies of the interlopers is, having battered someone to a fare thee well, they might ease up and allow them to begin to recover, regain higher ground, so to speak, and begin to make headway once again in life, only to have the rug pulled out from under them, perhaps even when in sight of victory in some way. This the interlopers find to be great fun. It is how they view sports, not something that is a fair competition, but a manipulation always, where they are in control and they decree winners and losers, deciding this in advance, and then doing whatever they need to bring about their desired endpoint. This is the measure of who they are. For a normal, healthy human being, engaging always in a rigged contest, guaranteeing victory for a normal person would become boring. And they would take no joy from knowing they were winning something undeserved, because they would be able to see that any act of manipulation to rig the outcome takes away the meaning of victory. And the apparent success would ring hollow and leave them not only unsatisfied, but feeling quite guilty about the matter. Psychopaths do not think like that. They think only of themselves. And the perversity that eventually produces is that in order to feel much of anything that is positive, they must look to a contrast between their own power and the fate of someone they can manipulate and cause to suffer. The greater the suffering, the better, because it thrills them to know their power to do such things. They cannot identify with the suffering of another, because they lack a conscience and will have no empathy or compassion. But they do know when someone is losing and they are winning, and it is that pain and suffering of their enemy that is their only pleasure. It is a perversion of reality. But keep in mind, these are damaged and incomplete beings, having lost the ability to love long, long ago.
I forgot to ask, to have you check on Eric Andelsek and see if he was in the light. I did an LHP for him, and I felt very strongly that he wasn't, and that the LHP made a difference. But you may still want to check on him when you get a chance. But I remember when that happened. It was very tragic and very unexpected too.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
sure. And this happens all over the world, targeted killings for all sorts of reasons, for politics, for making an invasive manipulation of the legal system, for example, to
Yeah.
kill off a witness against someone they want to support, or whatever is needed to manipulate things to their liking. They have no compunction about destroying human beings. I mean, look at World War II. Look at
Yeah.
what the
Oh, yeah.
Nazis were doing. That is their program. This is the most powerful and surprising message I think people could hear about the extraterrestrials. The Nazis are a typical tool
Yeah.
of their strategies. It came from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything bad in the world comes from extraterrestrials. I guarantee that. We think of it as human frailty, human weakness, human greed, human egos run amok. It's all human failures and failings and depravities and propensity for evil and so on. It's part of our nature, and we have to struggle with it, and we often lose. Well, that's not really true.
Yeah.
We're spiritual beings, but we've been corrupted and trained to think like criminal psychopaths, to make that normal. They've normalized it through our society, through our culture. And
Yeah.
you see that whenever there's a struggle between something that used to be thought of as immoral and now is embraced or
Yeah.
exalted. So this is a mission creep that
It's
we're part of and don't know it.
unbelievable. U.S. creator. Quarterback Eric Kramer was the quarterback of that ill-fated Lions team that got close to the Super Bowl in 1991. Years later, his life would unravel when his son died of a heroin overdose, his wife divorced him, and his parents died from cancer. His antidepressant medication stopped working, and Eric decided he could not go on that way. In 2015, he bought a gun, drove to a motel room and placed the gun under his jaw and pulled the trigger. Eric says the last thing he remembers was driving there, but with no memory of arrival, check-in, or pulling the trigger. Yet miraculously, not only did he not die, but he has since fully recovered with no apparent deficits of any kind, physical or mental. Was Eric a targeted individual? And was that targeting a backlash for his centerpiece role in getting the Lions close to the Super Bowl? If Eric had played anywhere else at the time, might he have avoided being targeted? A retrocausal LHP session has been done for Eric and was quite powerful. Is this the reason Eric not only survived, but was able to heal completely when the odds of such a thing are nearly unfathomable? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, these events were all a downstream consequence of the targeting underway for that ill-fated sports franchise, because this is what the interlopers wanted to see happen. They make the teams they disfavor fail in any way they can, and in fact, take great delight in devising a myriad of ways to bring that about, whether influencing weather, crowd support, accuracy and effectiveness of referees during the games, the actions of management and coaching to make them less inspired and less effective or even counterproductive in making bad decisions, as well as the individual happiness, physical health and well-being, and emotional life of the players. They will use any lever, and in fact, enjoy the variety and the challenge of coming up with a wide array of evil plots, because this is a kind of an amusement. It is like the follies of the idle rich, who, without having to make a living, have too much time on their hands and plenty of riches, so they can do almost anything and indulge themselves. When such beings are in power and their main desire is to engage in depravity, this is a prescription for an altered world, with less achieved at the expense of much happiness and joy. So, this was the downstream domino effect, so to speak, of being a part of a targeted group. Because the targeting of a sports team means all associated with that organization need to be targeted, because all can be grist for the mill, interfered with, manipulated, diminished, or sidelined through tragedy that is engineered to happen. The punishment may continue lifelong, well past when the players, for example, retire. Their targeted status does not go away, and any darkness that befalls them will put others on notice that there is a kind of curse underway, and that has a negative impact as well. You are quite correct that the consequences of the dire experience you describe was ameliorated through retrocausal healing. It is difficult for people to understand this concept without time, much discussion, and deep thought. The key to the understanding is that things are actually happening in parallel in the now, because linear time is an illusion. This makes it possible for the consequences of something done through divine intervention, launched in what appears to be the future, to have an effect on the present or even the past to help save the day. And that was done here, and responsible for the seemingly miraculous recoveries of these individuals who would otherwise have fared far worse.
Yeah, it's amazing, and Carl, I can't say that I fully understand retrocausal healing myself. I recognize its power, and I recognize when I need to jump in and do one to kind of seal the deal, complete the contract, so to speak. But I still can't say that I understand, how it works and even why it works. Poor Mike Utley has become paralyzed for life. I don't expect to be able to do a retrocausal healing and suddenly he's walking the next day. He's probably going to continue to be paralyzed for the remainder of his days here. So, but nevertheless, what happened in terms of the recovery of this quarterback, another one we're going to examine briefly, short coming up, was miraculous. I mean, to stick a gun under your jaw and pull the trigger, and then be able to fully recover without any deficits, other than having to need a little cosmetic surgery to, he sew up the hole in his tongue, you know, that's a miracle, and when we've learned that when we see a miracle, we have to, it's a duck that's quacking, right? If it quacks and it waddles, it's a duck, and a miracle's a miracle, Carl.
Well, and this is what Creator says. And the fact that it's done in an amazing, almost inconceivable fashion through going back in time to ameliorate the conditions in play and change the outcome is truly one of those things on an unbelievable level of being, a categorization.
Right.
But yet it happens. And in fact, here's the thing we've discovered in Get Wisdom. The people need to know about this. This is routine for the divine realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Oftentimes, to help someone, they go back into the past and they'll go on other timelines. They'll go back into prior lives and start to work on the karmic underpinnings of a current problem an individual has. And that can be the key and the only way to beat it back, because it's there for a reason. So there was a reason this person tried to take his life. It was a manipulation, but he was vulnerable. He was in a state of ignorance about the possibility, and he has some karmic responsibility, even as a victim in playing a role here.
Right.
And so the law of karma is going to govern all this, and that's what the divine realm has to counter, but it can, and under the right conditions. And especially when someone who's informed, has a big heart, wants to help, calls out to creator to do something to make it better. So this shows up in all kinds of ways, and most of the times never noticed, because what you experience is, well, you got something, maybe an infection and so on, but it didn't kill you, but it might have.
Yeah.
Without someone praying for you later and causing a divine retrocausal healing to come in and moderate it. And there's often not perfection in what the divine does. That's asking a lot. And of course, sometimes it's not even possible to completely scrub something clean and leave someone pristine. So there may be after effects, there may be side effects or complications or leftover damage that isn't fully restored, simply because it's too monumental a task for the energies available from
Right.
the human side. And that's a long discussion. But this has to come from us. That's why you need the advocates of Get Wisdom to launch these sort of things in a purposeful way, because people won't normally think about asking for something of this sort.
Yeah.
We do it all the time. It's part of our Lightworker healing protocol.
Exactly. Yeah. I never would have thought about it until I was reading all these channelings from Creator over the last few years. I never would have thought about it. I mean, it's yeah. U.S. Creator. Eric Kramer was not the only Lions quarterback who appears to have been targeted. Quarterback Eric Hipple. So there's three Erics there, Carl. Eric Candlestick, Eric Kramer, Eric Hipple. Maybe there's something to that. Who knows? Quarterback Eric Hipple, who played for the Lions in the 1980s, also attempted suicide when his life was unraveling in 1998. On the way to the airport in Detroit, Eric wrote a note to his wife who was driving that said, "I can't keep doing this." He unbuckled his seatbelt, opened the door, and exited the vehicle as it was doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway. He wrote in his 2008 book, Real Men Do Cry, "I honestly don't know what I was thinking at the time. Flight seemed like a pretty good idea for that split second, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital emergency room. I had a concussion and a lot of road rash from the pavement, and by the grace of God, no other injuries." Was that grace made possible by a retrocausal LHP said for him? What can Creator tell us?
Creator says that is indeed the case, that this individual would otherwise have likely not survived that eventuality at all. This is a dramatic example of retrocausal healing spanning a great seeming difference in time to change an event seemingly over and done with by an act in the future, looping into the past to still have an influence and change the outcome. This is a seeming miracle of divine providence, but is actually more mundane and straightforward, as it is simply exploiting the metaphysical realities of time being fluid and the simultaneity of existence that is an aspect of creation. These are not easily grasped concepts, and this we understand, but it is time to grow up and widen your thinking and accept the improbable as not only possible, but demonstrably true. We do not lie. So as you hear these descriptions, you are challenged to find an alternative explanation to dismiss what we say. This was a divine mission by your questioner here, taking on this role of rescuer because he, in turn, was divinely inspired to care about the plight of these sports figures. And that was acknowledged and honored as a free will choice, not only in divine alignment, but with a lofty goal indeed of righting a deep wrong, and in its way striking a blow for humanity as a living testament to the dilemma underway still that threatens survival of humanity altogether. This example of healing at the request of a mere human being to have something profound happen in a miraculous seeming way is the birthright of all of you. And if you wake up and get going, can achieve miracles of your own.
You know, it's interesting, but Eric Hipple, went on to dedicate his life to the prevention of suicide, and I think works to this very day at a University of Michigan Suicide Prevention Center, a very high level one that has a great reputation. So who would have thought, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, good for him.
He's become a light worker, big time, as a result of all this.
Good for him. We need people wanting things to be better and caring passionately. That's fuel the divine realm can use and contribute to miracles on request. And that is part of the energy that goes into the divine actions. The divine has to stay on the sidelines unless it's invited in.
Yeah.
And that's what prayer is for. And also what special high level healing requests, like we do through the Lightworker Healing Protocol, to bring in purposefully the opportunity for the divine can do its best to make something different and help someone along the way in a seeming miraculous outcome.
Yeah.
This is routine, but it has to be that someone is asking for divine help, because it rarely happens on its own, except through a backlog of prayer mounted for someone that can be borrowed in the moment. But there's precious little prayer power these days available, considering the enormity of human need.
Yeah. Well, there's still more to say about these two quarterbacks, Carl, unfortunately. Both Eric Kramer and Eric Hipple tragically lost their oldest sons, Kramer's to a heroin overdose and Hipple's to suicide with a shotgun. Were these boys also targeted as a result of their fathers playing for the Detroit Lions? Kramer's son might have survived, but a fellow party goer abandoned him on his couch at home rather than drive him to the hospital as he initially set out to do. The boy's would-be rescuer went back to the party, and Kramer's son died alone on the couch he was abandoned on. Was this a result of targeting as well? Are these boys in need of a spirit rescue? What could Creator tell us? And by the way, their LHPs were done for these two boys.
Creator says, here again is the legacy of being on the list of targeted individuals. That will likely be a permanent liability for the duration and may well be resumed following a reincarnation in a new lifetime, because the interlopers will see who you were in that prior life and may well pick up where they left off to subject you to all manner of abuse and to manipulate all those around you to turn against you or to cause suffering of those close to you, to drag you down and make you miserable. That was true for the sons of these athletes, that they were targeted to harm the family with another tragedy. As often happens with unexpected early passing, these boys struggled and were set upon with dark spirits to further punish and impair their future. Thankfully, they were rescued courtesy of the Lightworker Healing Protocol. And this, again, is a testament to human initiative and desire for the betterment of all subjected to darkness and misfortune.
Carl, when you first got these questions, did you do an LHP for these boys? Or
No.
even knew? No, okay. So Creator is talking in the past tense that they were rescued courtesy of the Lightworker Healing Protocol. And I didn't share with you that I had done LHPs for them ahead of time, right?
No.
So Creator is actually reporting that it was a done deal. And you don't know that, right? So this is a validation again.
Well, yes, and it's interesting how this works, because we're part of a vast dynamic of things that seem time dependent, that are actually malleable and flexible. So we have people coming to get wisdom, kind of interested in getting some help with a healing need of theirs. And some of those people won't change. They might feel a little better for, after a while. It might take quite a while to help them dramatically. But some of them, we know from our channeling, would be dead if
Yeah.
it weren't for the fact that they could be persuaded in the future to come and get a healing intervention underway. And this is this retrocausal thing, because Creator sees the future. Creator knows that this person can be influenced to find a path to human help. So they're not doing it all on their own. That's not allowed. God cannot lead. God can only follow human requests. And this puts everyone at a disadvantage. But there's workarounds, and this is one of them, the miracle of retrocausal healing.
Carl, real quick, how important is retrocausal healing, do you think, to soul matrix healing?
Well, I think it's part and parcel of what's involved, because soul matrix healing is a broad-based method that incorporates every source of negativity, but also all the players, all those doing things to one another, having them done to them, and then through all of time. So it goes out on all timelines, past, present, and future, and does work on behalf of the client. That is how this retrocausal mechanism is such a huge part of things when there is a divine intervention.
Right.
And this is something everyone needs, because we all have a monumental backlog of unmet healing need that has grown through more than 400 lifetimes on average.
Yeah. And on to just one last point, Creator said that the targeting for these boys could continue in a future life. That was, I've read that and I just almost fell over. It's like unbelievable, you know.
Well, it isn't unbelievable to me, because
No,
I've had a
no, it's
number of
not. But
people in my
it,
practice, people have come to me who I could see intuitively were big name light workers in the past. I mean, I'm talking about people everyone around the world knows.
right,
And
right.
today in life, they're humbled, they're diminished, they're sidelined. And it's through targeting, because
Yeah.
the interlopers see, oh, here comes this miracle figure from the past. We got to get on them right away. And they start in infancy to mess up their life, so
But
they
that,
can't be successful and powerful again.
but it's even worse than that, Carl, because it's one thing you say, well, if a saint who is the in the craw of these ETs comes back, maybe that makes some logical sense. But these two boys probably weren't saints in previous lives. They just happened to be a waterfall effect, a downstream effect, a domino effect of having been associated
Yeah,
with players
right.
who play for the Detroit Lions, who were part of the city of Detroit, who won World War II, right?
Yeah, they're cannon fodder. They're innocent bystanders used to punish the parents. That's the point of it.
Yeah.
That's often a strategy, that to punish the targeted people, they'll punish everything they care about and everything they love around them. And that includes family members, unfortunately.
Yeah. And not just in one lifetime. Oh, God.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Unbelievable.
this is why you call it a grudge.
Yeah.
I mean, it's long lasting, it's deeply entrenched.
Oh, boy. U.S. Creator, who would have thought, myself included, an NFL football team could be such an object lesson and crucible of interloper interference in human affairs? Can Creator share how empowered how can Creator share how empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol are the means by which the targeting not just of the Lions or the Rust Belt, but indeed all of humanity, can be brought to a complete, safe, and effective end once and for all?
Creator says, you are coming to the main point of the discussion here, that having to deal with adversity is not just a condition of life one must bear and somehow muddle through, or perhaps at some intervals gain a victory of sorts, but then might be thrust back into the fray, perhaps starting at the bottom all over again, and having to go through the trials and tribulations of having attacks mounted against you by unseen forces, and watch the destruction on many around you, and the widespread suffering of an unfair world, with all the travesties that happen attributed to human frailty, ignorance, and evil, when in fact it is orchestrated to be that way and kept in a low state of awareness of the reasons why, and still lacking the wherewithal to deal with your opposition in any meaningful way. With the advent of empowered prayer and the Lightworker Healing Protocol. This changes the equation because these are the tools long needed to create the capability for humans to have a fighting chance of winning against their adversaries. You have been continually suppressed and subjugated throughout the existence of humanity from almost the very beginning of the human race on the planet Earth. That is because aliens found you early on and enslaved you and manipulated you genetically to have defects and to always be in the dark about things. So even though you are light beings and fresh from the light, when you incarnate, it is like starting over and with a huge disadvantage in not understanding where you come from, why you are here, let alone what you can do to gain greater control of things. When you are being manipulated from deep within your own mind and do not even know it, that alone greatly restricts what's possible and would ordinarily condemn you to living as a slave, perhaps indefinitely. What has happened instead is a gradual awakening through the repeated efforts of many newly arrived human beings charged with a mission life to bring divine insight and wisdom to the awareness of others and begin to gain the knowledge needed to do better and find solutions for the seeming mysteries of why the world is so difficult and why it is so hard for human beings to overcome their own foibles, to become successful and help others do the same. With the advent of this Lightworker Healing Protocol, for the first time in human history, you have a way to heal the interlopers. And because they are in charge and hold the power, the only way to save yourselves is to raise them up so they change their plans in time to spare you from annihilation. That is but the first step needed. But we can tell you, if enough of you hear these words and embrace the challenge and opportunity to learn the Lightworker Healing Protocol and implement it, it will add significantly to the healing of the interlopers. And this can save the day to extend the timeline you have. And this will allow a grand ascension that has been Creator's plan all along, but will not happen until humanity is healed from all the depredations carried out over the millennia. That will take a considerable effort, and it cannot happen in time to save you from destruction by the interlopers. That is why healing them as a priority is an imperative for your success. This can be done in the privacy of your own mind, simply in learning the protocol and conducting sessions, invoking Creator with your thoughts, with the precise instructions needed to know what to ask for and how. That does not put you at risk, but it is an act of loving kindness that will bring a karmic benefit. And if this changes the destiny of humanity, it will live for all of time as a signal event in the evolution of the universe in a glorious new direction that will only be possible if you can solve the problem of evil here and now before it is too late.
And that's really the point of this whole show, was to put on display the power of the Lightworker Healing Protocol. That's an empowered prayer. This is what you can do to change the game and change the outcome. And we put some very powerful examples together in this show for Creator to comment on about the effectiveness of this protocol. I mean, it's profound. I mean, the miracles that happen in saving these two quarterbacks when they should be dead by all rights and measures. And then one of them, I was talking to Carl, saying that quarterback Eric Hippel's gone on to do fantastic things in his life, becoming a light worker essentially. And his daughter went on to also become a therapist, and she also, works with people that are suicidal. So the wave effect, the fallout effect, we want a positive one, because we talked about the fallout effect of the ETs doing this targeting. We need a counter fallout effect, ripple effect, where the light flows out and neutralizes everything that's been done. And the Lightworking Healing Protocol is the way that can happen, Carl.
Well, and that is the intention, and that is the way it is constructed. It has layers and layers of leveraging to further empower it, add to its reach and extensiveness in being very comprehensive and in covering all the bases, including all of the vagaries and opportunities of this complex mesh of timelines that envelops everything and that we play off of and play from. And that is a key to this. Getting the knowledge needed at long last, and this is what Creator is saying, we had to figure out what to ask for because God has been waiting. We haven't asked for the right things up to now. Most of religion is wrapped up in worshiping the Almighty. Well, that's
Yeah.
fine, but that's not helping us.
All right.
It's paying respects. Well, that's step one. Hello, nice to see you. I'm so
Yeah.
glad you're well. Okay.
Never get
Now
past
what?
step one.
Yeah. So this is our charge. It's why we're here. And this is an opportunity like none other
Yes.
to be a part of something fantastic, and will have lasting consequence through all of the future.
Well, we need you to get on board. And the best way to do that right now, right here and now, is go to getwisdom.com/LHP, getwisdom.com/LHP, and download the Lightworker Healing Protocol ebook. You can also learn about empowered prayer at getwisdom.com/prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer, and download our prayer book. That's all we got for this month's Get Wisdom Live. We'll see you next month, everybody. Thanks.
Be well.